Okay, so I've been wanting to talk about this for a while. I've showed this video, or at least sent it to so many people. Let me turn it down. So this is obviously Flash playing a game, and I just want to use this clip of him playing to kind of just help illustrate what I'm talking about. There's a lot of lower level Terran players and people new to the game who like come into the discords and ask for help and all this stuff and get really, they kind of idolize the strategy and like the build and uh, you know um, they want a checklist of what to do, for every scenario in the game, so that they can win. And there's a lot of Terran players in there that are like higher level and stuff. There's actually not that many, but there's a couple, and everybody is the higher level Terrans are always saying the same thing, and then you can watch like really high level Terran players, like obviously like a god like Flash, executing what the Terran players are telling people in CPL to do. And the reality is with this game is that it's a real time strategy game, and it's like 90% real time and 10% strategy. And playing Terran is all about control and your ability to control the units. And I'm going to use this clip of Flash playing to illustrate what I'm talking about. And so for people who are like pretty new to Brood War, the idea of the game really used to just be centered around macro. And so there's a lot of people who, when they go and they get into like a fight or something in the game, they get into a battle, as soon as they siege their tanks, they look away and they go to their factories and they make units, because that used to be the way to do it. Today, everything is about control. That's like basically the meta. It's way less about macro. And with Terran especially, Terran is really, 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 really strong. All the units are super strong, but all the units, for the most part, have abilities and require you to pay the utmost attention to them and use them correctly. Like the Vulture is one of the best units in the game, but it's kind of weak. They die really easily, but if you give them a lot of attention, they're one of the best units in the game. And I think that this clip that Wolfix sent me a long time ago, and me and other Terran players have watched it like a million times. And if you're pretty new, then maybe this won't have that great of an impact on you. But the more you play the game, the more you'll realize how ridiculous this is. And so just to give it some context, this is like a cross spawn TVP. The Protoss player is on 4 gateways and has a Reaver, and Flash is pushing off of 2 factories. Okay? And I like there's 2 parts to this, right? There's the control, which is like god mode, right? Because it doesn't only come down to control, right? It comes down to like your decision making of your control, right? Like where you're going to siege your tanks is like, microing your tanks back from the goons that are going to hit it is one thing, and then sieging them in the right spot and when you siege them is another thing, and that's all like experience, right? But any Terran player I know that like I play with regularly would die here every time. So, and then the other thing is just notice when he chooses to look away from his army and how often he looks away, okay? This is absolute madness that we're sitting here versus a shuttle and a Reaver and this many goons with only tanks. And I think anyone that's played Terran for any amount of time knows that like at the C, the B level, the low A level, if you're playing like an A Protoss, I mean, I was just playing Semi yesterday, who I've known for a long time, and he was destroying me with a shuttle and a Reaver. So this is like incredible that he's even doing this in the first place. But you see how long he's on the screen for? Like he hasn't looked away this entire time. So then he kills its mines. Okay, so now that was really fast, what all that stuff he just did. But he basically was on the same screen that entire time, never looked away. And then when he unsieged his tanks, that takes a couple seconds, and he went back to his base and did what he needed to do, and then he came back by the time they were unsieged. See how he's kind of leapfrogging the tanks? He's still on the same screen. He doesn't look away until it's safe to look away, right? Until he's kind of gotten everything done that he needs to get done during the battle. Like he's not fighting right now, so he's looking away. This is perfect. Now he's back to looking. Because he's not fighting, right? So he's looking away. Now shuttle comes. Giving everything attention. Still on the same screen with his units. So the point that I'm trying to make is that, like, yeah, Flash has God control, and that takes a lot of time, and like nobody can just come into the game and do that. But the amount of time that he spends looking at the army and giving it 100% attention, I watch a lot of other people play. They don't give their units that much attention, and it's the same like with Zerg as an example. Like, you can get to S rank with Zerg with Muta Micro. That's how good and controllable those units are in this game. Now, it's not that easy to get that good at Micro with Mutas. I mean, you have to put a lot of time in. But the point is that, like, with control, you will roll through people if you have better control than them in today's gameplay. You'll absolutely roll through them. I don't care if they have better macro than you. If the game state is relatively even or you're ahead and you have better control during your engagements, you're going to win, especially in TVP. So, because, you know, the downside to this matchup when you're at lower level is, like, the Protoss player, like, seriously, you know, like, anything below A, they really don't have to give their units as much attention as you do as the Terran player. That dynamic changes as the Terran players get better. Protoss players really have to start to control their units a lot better as the Terran players control their units a lot better, which a lot of Protoss players realize as they, you know, hit the higher A Terrans. Their control is insane, and so then you need to start having, like, insane shuttle control and Reaver micro and make sure that you're doing everything correctly. But at the lower levels, like, let's say below A, Protoss can really kind of A-move into the Terran army, and it's, I don't want to say it's totally inconsequential, but, like, with Stasis and Storm and all that stuff, if you're not on top of your army, like 100% attention to your army is going to completely disappear, and you're going to lose the game. And we've seen it a million times. So the point that I'm making is this whole thing where you're like, I tell people all the time when they're new to Terran about this matchup and what I think they should do, right? If you can max out and get 2-2 upgrades by 14 minutes in your D, you're going to steamroll everybody, right? But every Terran player I know that's hit A, that's constantly high B, and I'm speaking to myself here too, and even higher level Terran players, you can sit in your base, you can nail your build, you can never get supply blocked, you can not lose any SCVs, you can defend from the Reaver, you can defend from the DT drops, you can defend from the Storm drops, get your 3 bases, max out at 14 minutes, move across the map, get A moved into by a Protoss army, and lose the entire game. Even though we have these conversations all the time, that the maxed Terran mech army is so much stronger than the Gateway army from Protoss, which is 100% true. The Protoss units do not scale half as well as the Terran units do in this matchup until we get to, like, carriers, right, or something. But Dragoons, Zealots, and Arbiters versus 2-2 tanks, Vultures, Goliaths, and Science Vessels, if you control your units well enough, the Protoss army doesn't stand a chance. But that requires you not clumping your tanks, not sieging everything on hotkeys, you know, laying mines correctly, EMPing, targeting the shuttles with the Goliaths. And so there's a lot of housekeeping that you have to do. But if you look away from your army, then, you know, you can't execute the housekeeping. And so if you watch really high-level Terran players, man, their minerals, their resources are going to go up when they're fighting. It's okay. Especially when you're maxed, right, and you're pushing across the map versus Protoss. At the end of the fight, I would rather have 3,000 minerals and 160 supply, right? Because I lost them during the fight, and I had killed the entire Protoss army. Now, maybe their minerals, the Protoss minerals, go down to 0 because they have 2 corners and they have 25 gateways and they max out all their gateways. But if I clear their army and don't lose all my tanks, and my minerals went up and I didn't go back to my factories during the fight, I can go back after. I just murdered their entire army. Like, they're probably dead. And so the just to reiterate, because I could ramble on about this forever, and this is turning into a fucking podcast at this point, but everything is about control. Like, someone asked me for a video on like how to defend a 4-pool when you're walling in TVZ, and it's like, okay, I've watched like Gypsy, for example, get 4-pooled when he's walling and hold it with 1 Marine and his SCVs, and there's nothing more that I can say about defending a 4-pool when you're walling in TVZ, other than the fact that you better control that 1 Marine that's going to come out in your SCVs very, very well. You better not do anything else other than keep that Marine alive and try to fight with the SCVs. That's it. And you see pro gamers do it. I mean, how many I've seen it in SSL or ASL or whatever, where a Protoss player will get BBS'd, right? And they'll win the game with 1 goon with range because they control it. And so control. Get the idea out of your head that there's some build that's going to take you to A rank, because there's not, right? I mean, the better you get at the game, the more like optimizing and all that stuff matters. But I don't believe that it scales as much as your ability to control all your units, right? So I've had to force myself to break this habit too. And TVZ is a really good example where it's like you want to get better at TVZ, you better be able to macro all your barracks off your left hand on your keyboard and not look away from your Marines. Because you're going to start hitting Zerg players with Muta Micro that's going to make your face turn red and make smoke come out of your ears. It's so goddamn good that you're never going to be able to look away from your Marines to like go to your barracks and macro. You better stare at your Marines and be able to make Marines from your barracks without having to look away, so that when the mutas come, you can stim in and try to target one. Stuff like that, And if you're trying to do timings like in this matchup in TVP, where you're like, let's say you're doing like a 5-fact and you're trying to push it and win the game, like if you want to be able to macro and do stuff like that and win, like if you go watch 4GG or Flash or anything like that all the factories are hotkeyed so that they can pay attention to their units. There's no screen like F4 on their factories, and so it's all about control. So get that into your head. If you're a lower level player and you're saying things like, well, I can't like multitask as well as the higher level players or whatever, it's like, that's fine, man. You can hotkey your command centers and keep making SCVs while you're running vultures around the map and laying mines, and then when you have time, you can go back and send the 3 workers or 4 workers or 5 workers that you haven't sent to mine individually as they've come out, all to mine at the same time. So that way that you're out on the map and you're laying your mines and you're doing the harassing with the vultures. And then last thing is, you got to remember, the more you're using your units and controlling your units and doing things, and you're thinking like, oh, my minerals are going up or whatever, it's like your opponent is also having to deal with what you're doing with your units. And so it's very unlikely that if you're stuck at some level of play, you're like in C, that the C Protoss player is going to be able to handle your unit control and their macro at the same time. So you're not just playing it yourself, you're playing another person. And so everything that you do is going to force a reaction from your opponent too. So it's also going to slow them down. And the better you get at the game, the better you get at multitasking, then you'll ladder up, because you can out multitask a lot of people, right? And that's like what really TVZ is like out multitasking the Zerg player, because the Terran player has a lot to do and the Zerg player has a lot to do. And if you can, out tempo them the whole game, then you're going to win. So anyways, I could ramble about this forever. I hope that makes sense, guys. Toodaloo.